Hi and welcome to Swedish Plant Guys, Q&A episode 2. Now this is the videos in where we try and answer as many questions as possible. We have gotten a ton of questions that we're really happy about, and just keep on sending them. And I'd like to add as well, if there is a video you want us to make, a all you need to know video or a tips or tricks video, please don't hesitate to make a comment about that. We read all your questions, but we try and answer them like this in a video, because it takes too much time to try and answer every single question down in the comments section. So we read them, we promise, and we try and answer them here. Now we have a lot of questions that are similar in nature. So a couple of these questions we're going through today are a couple of questions that we chosen to merge together and make one question out of. So first question, do you need to rinse pumice before use? Now we have a video out of what pumice is and how to use it. To summarize it, it's better to plant your indoor plants in pumice than in soil. So please check that video out. This is pumice and the pumice that we use. Now the question was, do you need to rinse it before using it? No, you don't. Now, of course, this depends on where you've bought it. But so I can only look at the different types of pumice that we can buy. And there I can say, no, you never have to rinse it. Because the pumice is a by nature made product. It is the volcanic rock that shoots out first out of a volcano. So you want everything that is in the pumice. You have a lot of small traces of minerals and other good stuff for your roots and for your plants. So never rinse it off, use it as it is, straight out of the box. Next question. With houseplants, can you use pumice only without any soil? So the question is regarding the pumice again. Can you use only pumice and no soil? Of course. That is our main reason for showing you the all you need to know about pumice video, is that we never mix soil with pumice. We use only pumice. That being said, we use a little bit of soil because when we get the plants, they are planted in the typical plastic pot with soil. We just knock off the plastic pot, use that soil together with pumice, but only pumice. We do not mix the pumice with soil and then add it to the container or the pot. We only add pumice. So yes, you can do that. And if you do that, you get all of the good things that you can hear about in that video. So please check that out. Question number 3. What size of pumice rock do you use? Now, we have a company here in Sweden that makes this pumice for us, and it is made for planting plants in it. So I can't buy different sizes. Now I know that you guys that are from America, you can buy it from Amazon and you can buy different sizes of pumice. I've checked that out, and I think I have an answer for this one. The size that we have here is a mix. It's a mix of maybe 3 or 4 different sizes of pumice. So I think what you need to do is to buy a couple of different sizes, where the biggest size is a little bit bigger than 1 centimeter. I think, we don't use inches here in Sweden, but I think that means 3/8 of an inch is about a little bit bigger than 1 centimeter. That should be the biggest. And then you can use smaller as well and mix it up. Now, our experience with pumice is that you should use more of the bigger size than of the smaller. Because the bigger the size pumice you have, the less water will transport itself via the capillary powers from the bottom of the pot up into the pumice. The bigger grain size you have, the biggest pumice you have, the less water will transport itself up. And that's a good thing, because you don't want to have too much water around the roots. You want a lot of air as well. So mix the different sizes, and also try, if you find a perfect mix, don't hesitate to please add it to the commentary section, and we will take it up in one of our videos and give that tip to everyone. Okay, next question. Could you please tell how you water plants in pumice? Do you just pour water from one side and let it accumulate in pumice, or do you water over the soil part around the plant in pumice zone? Okay, it doesn't matter. It's that simple. Now the question was, where do I put the water if you have a plant here in the middle? It doesn't matter. Wherever you water, because the big thing about pumice is that when you water it, it can only absorb around 1/3 of its volume with water. And the excess water is going to go down into the bottom. And then the water drinks the water, and some of it evaporates, but then the water from the bottom started to go up. But it can only hold 1/3 of its volume with water. All other water will fall down to the pot. So it doesn't matter where you water it. The plant is going to get the water either way. Okay? Next question. Do you think I could use perlite instead of pumice? Now that is a good question, I think. Perlite is a man-made substance. Pumice is a substance made by nature. So I think the biggest question there is, do you want to use something that has an environmental impact, or do you want to use something that already exists, that doesn't do anything to nature? Now pumice is 100% natural. And another thing is that the perlite, even though it has almost the same function as pumice do, it is very, very lightweight. So if you should use only perlite and you start to water your plants, I think the plant maybe will fall over, because the perlite actually moves around in water. Pumice doesn't. Pumice is so weighty, it has that much weight that the water doesn't do anything with it. And you have to have a substrate that keeps your plant straight so that it doesn't fall. So you could use perlite in theory, but I would use pumice every day of the week and never use perlite. Next question. I've planted a CC plant. Now, CC plant is a Samioculcas samifolia, also in Sweden called garderobsblomma. I just planted it in pumice, just as you showed for self-watering, with the microfiber cloth and everything. I don't know what is wrong. My CC plant is turning black at the bottom of the stalks and on a couple of the leaves. Help, I don't know what to do. Okay, when you create a self-watering system, you create a system that means that you only have to water maybe once a month. However, there are plants that need very, very little water. And the CC plant is one of these plants. So even if you put it in a self-watering system, you need to check all the time to see that the plant doesn't get too wet. It needs to dry out really well before you add new water, even if it's in a self-watering system. Now the CC plant is an exception like that, because the CC plant needs to dry out. When it doesn't do that, because what happened here, when the bottom of the stalks are turning black, it means that they are rotting. and they're probably rotting because you have given it too much water. So it's a good question. There are a couple of plants like this. The Sansevieria is also a plant that needs very little water, and the CC plant as well. Also succulents of different types, succulent plants, need quite little water, and even if you have it in a self-watering system, you need to check so that it doesn't get too much water. Good question. Next question. I made the self-watering system with everything you used. How often should I actually water the pot? Now this is almost the same question as the last one, with a little bit of difference. In the beginning, when you've made a new self-watering system, what happens is that you want the roots to start to grow out and grow down to where all the water is. Where you accumulate the water storage area down in the bottom. That will take a couple of weeks or a couple of months depending on which type of plant you have planted in the self-watering system. So the first couple of months you should give just a little bit of water to the self-watering system. You shouldn't fill it up all the way because the roots grow fastest when they are searching for water. So if you keep it a little bit dry, the roots are actually going to start to grow and go down to the water, and there it will get all the water it wants. So the first couple of months in a self-watering system, you have to vary the water a little bit. See to it that there is a little bit of water in the bottom of the pot, and that the soil or pumice, whichever you have planted it in, is a little bit moist, but don't fill too much water. Let it dry out so the roots can start searching down to the water. Once it's reached the water, you can add full water all the time, every time you water. Now, usually that means that you have to water once a month, but it is depending on how much water you can add to the pot you have. So you are restricted to the size of the pot, of course, but normally once a month. Next question. How to use it in pot with holes. Now this is also concerning the pumice. How do you use this in a pot that has holes in the bottom? For instance, if you want to plant season flowers outside of in your garden in a pot, how to use pumice? That is also a very good question. Now, you could just put something over the hole in the bottom of the pot. Now, for you if you're into bonsai, for instance, you do this all the time. You use quite a lot of very porous material to plant your bonsai, and in the bottom holes of the pots, you add just maybe a little bit of a small piece of microfiber cloth, like a cleaning cloth, or some small net. If you can buy some cheap small metallic net. Just something that keeps the pumice inside the pot so that it doesn't fall out. But you need the water to go out through the bottom hole. So put something over. You can also crush maybe an old pot of terracotta or other ceramic type pots, and use a little bit of that ceramic put over the hole so that the water comes through but not the pumice. Now, an extra tip for you is that if you do that, if you put in a large container outside which has holes in the bottom, then you are very limited in how much water you can give that system, because all of the water is going out the bottom of the pot. So what you do is that you take a bucket, a plastic bucket of some sort. Just use a plastic bucket that is a little bit smaller than the bottom of the pot you use. And then you cut it. So you put that, you add maybe 5 centimeters of pumice in the bottom of your outside pot. Then you add this plastic the plastic bucket. And depending on how big your outside pot is, you just cut it so, and then you add pumice inside of it and around it, then you plant your plants. I think we will make a video to describe this even better, but what happens now is that when you water the pumice, the water goes through the pumice and it's going to accumulate down inside of the bucket, up to the point where the bucket ends, and it's going outside of the bucket and outside of the whole of the bigger pot. So you get a water container inside of the pot. Now, if you planted in soil, this would be a problem, because if you had that much water standing inside of your outer pot, the soil would be very, very, very wet. And the roots they would die, because you wouldn't have any air to the roots. But in the pumice, like I said before, it can only take up 1/3 of its volume with water, then it just releases it. So you have a water container inside of your pot that is going to give water to all of the pumice, and just as much water as it needs. All the excess water goes out in the bottom of the pot. Now you have a perfect self-watering system for outside. We will make a video about that later on. So, next question. Is tap water good enough to re-root a cutting? Or does it contain too much chlorine? Which is the best alternative? Well, we made a video about how you make cuttings out of a Dracaena. I never specify that because I didn't think I had to. You don't have to use distilled water with your cuttings. You can use normal tap water. Now, if you know that you are in an area where the tap water has a high amount of chlorine, more than usual, then maybe you should use some other type of water, maybe rainwater or distilled water, or mix your tap water. But normally, for I think about 90% of everyone, you can use your tap water. That's not a problem. The problem, as I say in the video, is that you have to exchange the water frequently. If you can, every day. Otherwise, every other day, every third day. See to it that it has clean water straight from the tap. Okay? Next question. For palm trees like Kentia or Hauea fosteriana, or Areca palms, which is called Chrysalocarpus lucentens, indoors, can you use pumice? Easy to answer, yes. You can use pumice for every type of indoor plant, even orchids. The only thing that can happen is that if you have a plant that needs very much water, a plant that loves its water, that can never dry out, the only negative thing about pumice we found is that when it has that much water in it all the time, and the sun is in it, and it's standing maybe in on a windowsill, the sun can make the pumice grow a little bit of algae on it. It can be a little bit green because of all the water and the sunlight. That's the only negative. But for the plant, yes, you can use it for every indoor plant you can imagine. Next question. I have kept 2 cuttings since May. It is now November, so for 6 months in water and still no roots. Each have 1 sprout growing, but I'm tired of changing water every 3 days. What have I done wrong? Well, first of all, you've done everything right because you've listened to our video and you exchange the water every 3 days. Perfect. The only thing I can say is that some plants take a very long time before the roots come out. As long as the cutting looks fine, there is not a problem. But you say that your cutting is 50 centimeters long. Now that can be a little bit of a problem because that is a long way for the plant to transport the water without any roots. It's just transporting the water through the small tubular systems inside of the stem. So what I would do is that I would cut that cutting down so that it's maybe 10, 15, maximum 20 centimeters long. It doesn't need to be 50 centimeters big. Cut it down so that it's smaller. I know if you cut it now, you're going to start over. But if nothing has happened for 6 months, that's my recommendation for you. Cut it so that it gets a little bit smaller. The best thing is that it's just maybe 10 to 15 centimeters, because then it will root quite quickly. But you can get a larger cutting, but not too long. Next question. What about the corn plant? Mine is 9 feet tall. Can I cut it into 3 pieces? Now this is also concerning making a cutting out of a Dracaena. Now the corn plant is also called Dracaena massangeana, if you want to check out which plant it is regarding. And he says that it's 9 feet tall. Can I make it into 3 pieces? I would say that you can make it into 10 pieces. Like I said in the question before, don't make the cuttings too big. Make them quite small. Then you have a larger percentage, a larger advantage of getting roots to repot the cutting. So smaller cuttings. And it works fine for the massangeana. Next question. I have a Dracaena that is doing nothing. It has been the same size for years. What should I do to make it grow? I will try to attach a photo. Okay, so she has a Dracaena that is not growing. It's basically standing still. And I don't see the problem. Because in my world, that's perfect. Because usually you buy a plant, when you buy it in the size you want it. Now, as soon as the plant, if you do everything right with the plant, it starts to grow. It starts to reshape, and you have to cut it, you have to form it, you have to put in a lot of work with it, and it's not going to look like it did when you bought it. Now, on the other hand, if you take care of it poorly, it's maybe not going to die, but you're going to get yellow leaves, brown leaves, it's not going to look good. So the perfect thing is really to be in between. Now we call this in Sweden, in Swedish we call this to live on visningsgränsen. Now I don't have a good English word for this, but what it means is that the plant is living on the edge between growing and dying. And that's where you want to be. So I don't see a problem here. You're doing everything right. But if you wanted to make this plant grow, the Dracaena, then do 2 things. I think that it's not placed somewhere that it has enough light. So move it to somewhere where it gets a little bit more light than it does today. And then you add more nutrients to the soil, or pumice, or what you've had it planted in. Add more nutrients than you do today. Now, if you don't add nutrients today, then you know why it's not growing. But if you are, then increase the amount of nutrients you're giving it. And you'll see that it will start to grow. But I wouldn't do that. I would just keep on doing what you do, because that's perfect. When a plant is standing still, that's perfect. Next question. Now, I'm afraid because I did not use a pumice with plant food pellets added to it. I never heard you say that until just now. I've been potting in only pumice and not adding this, then using liquid fertilizer when watering. Am I killing off all the plants? That's not a problem. The pumice we use, the company that makes this, adds long-term nutrient pellets to this. And that makes it a little bit better for the plant, of course. It gives it a little bit more nutrients. You don't have to add fertilizer or nutrients as often. If you don't have those pellets in the pumice, that's not a problem. Just keep on doing what you're doing and add it with the water, together with the water. Now, liquid fertilizer together with the water when you're watering your pot and when you're watering your plant. So it's not a problem. Just see to it and look at the plant. If you see that something is wrong, you have to know, okay, I have to add more nutrients to the plant. But it's not a problem per se that you have forgotten these. So don't worry. Now, next question. My question is, how can I have my plant leaves nice and shiny? Well, I have a new Dracaena here. This is the Dracaena Zinto. And this is straight out of the grower in Netherlands, where we buy all of our plants. And it has a very good shine to it. You can see that this plant is feeling well and growing. Now, when you've had your plants standing inside of your house for a couple of months, maybe a couple of years, the plant is going to look older. You can never do anything about this. You can cut off and make it regrow, and then you have a new plant again. But otherwise, it's going to sag a little bit. It's going to be, and it's not going to be as shiny as when you bought it. Now, that is normal. That's not a problem. It's not a problem for the plant. However, if you every month, once a month, take a cloth that you have saturated in water and just drag over the leaves once a month like this, you never have to add something to make it shine. The plant will do that itself. But you need to take away all of the dust in the air that is landing on the plant, because it's actually landing straight on top of the pores. And the pores here in the leaf has a function that it's controlling the temperature inside of the plant. It opens and closes these small pores. Now, when you have dust in the air that falls on these, it closes the pores so that they can't open and close. So the plant gets a little bit stressed, it has a problem with that, and what you see is that it doesn't produce this shiny, glossy, fully natural leaf shine that the plant can make itself. But if you dry it away, take away that dust once a month, all the time, it will keep that shine for a very, very long time. Now, that was all the questions we had time for this time. Please add more questions. Add them to whatever video you're watching at the time. Just add a question if you have one. We promise that we read them, and we're going to use them in a Q&A video like this further on. Now, if you've had a question that we haven't talked about yet, it will come. Just don't worry. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more videos like this, and hit that bell button as well, so that you get a notification every time we post a new video. Thanks for this time. Hej då!